All right, thank you. Welcome everyone to our class today. Today we are going to be moving forward from where we stopped with forms last week. So last week we handled the controlled forms, control components and uncontrolled components, right? We also saw a glimpse of what validation looked like, and we had a take home, and we are still on that take home, right? So for today, we are going to be talking about Formik a little bit. Formik is a library for handling forms, right? The Formik component wraps the form and provides the form state and handlers. So Formik on its own contains a lot of like contains its own properties. So it handles everything for you. It can handle everything for you, including your input fields, your the form components, your error messages, right? Well, let's just dive into it so you see what it looks like. So we are going to, first of all, install Formik. So let's close this. We won't be needing this in this class. All right, so let's install Formik. I'll say npm install Formik. Yup. So you might be asking, why am I adding yup here, right? Yup is also yup is what we use for form validation. When using Formik, you use yup for form validation. Basically it's what's mostly used for form validation. Even if you are not using Formik, right? You still use yup for form validation. It's the form validation library, right? So I'll install Formik. All right, so we're done. That was quick. So what we'll do now, ideally what I usually do is create a validation component, all right? But let's handle everything in one file for the purpose of easy understanding. So we'll create another form component. Let's call it using Formik.jsx. The array of CA. All right. So let's call this, let's call it sign up. Okay. So first of all, we are going to import the Formik properties, right? Import the structure Formik from field. And then we also need error message. All right. So all these will be imported from Formik. Okay. All right. Yeah. Then we also import our yup for validation. So we also import yup for validation. So let's handle our sign up schema. So let's say const sign up schema equals to yup dot objects not shape. Is it clear? Is what's happening here clear to you? Or do you need explanation further? Are we all clear with what's happening? Need explanation. Okay. So where do you need explanation? Can you specify? Explain for Yop. Okay. All right. So what happens here in Yop is that this Yop.object, right, does shape. It initializes a new Yop schema object, right? So what I'm doing here is just initializing an object. So this object now is supposed to contain the scheme or the schema for sign up. So let's assume that we want to have like a sign up schema that should contain, say, name, email, address, password, right? So I've initiated or I've created or initialized this object. So I'm saying this is a Yop object. Yop generally is for validation, right? So I want to create a validation object. And then within that object now is where I'm going to define my validation schema, right? So if I say name now, if I say name, so I want to receive the name from the user, right? And then I want to say this name. So I want to say for this name, let us initiate another Yop, but this time I want it to be a string. So I'm saying initiate another Yop, but let it be a string, right? And then I now say I want it to be required. Okay, then yes, I can define what I want to see if it is not available. I want to give name is required. Do you understand? Does it make any sense now? Okay, well, a bit. So unmute yourself, Abubakar.
Okay,
So
wait,
what exactly are you getting lost?
I don't know the Yob. It's just the concept is just kind of confusing. You
Okay,
said
so
the Yob dot object. Okay, you can just
yes,
explain it.
let me bring it down. Let me cut it down a little for you. You understand the whole concept of syntax, right?
Yes,
Everything
I
has
do.
everything has a syntax. You get
Yes, sir.
good. So now you want to. This is a syntax for creating for using Yop, right?
Yes, sir.
Right. Now inside Yop, there are different data types, right? So you
Yeah.
said this is an object. This is a string. Are you
Yeah.
following?
Yes, sir, I'm following.
In a case where you want a number, let's say maybe phone number, and you don't want it to be, or maybe you want to get, let's say phone number or house number, right? Or age, and you want it to be a number, this will be number. Do you
Okay.
understand?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So what you are doing here is that you are saying, okay, for this Yop schema, I want this Yop schema to be an object because I want to define other schemas inside this object. So this already is a validation, right?
Oh,
Now, you now come here and then you now say, okay, for name, right?
yes, sir.
So I want the user is going to input their name. But for this name, I want to also validate this name. So I say, okay, validate this name. It has to be a string, right?
Yes, sir.
It has to be a string and it is required. So that means if this name is not there, that form will not submit.
Okay, okay, I get it. So it's individual validation.
Good, exactly. So after having this form object created, I now validate that name, and then I can go ahead now and validate email. Right? And I say, yup. I want the email to be a string, of course. And then the email has to be, so you see that I did not use required here. I use email.
Okay.
This email now validates that email input field to make sure that it is an email that is inputted. Just like that validation we did in our last class where I had to define the email structure, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So what this does is that it helps validate that email structure to make sure that the email is correctly imputed. If it's not correctly imputed, we can now add another error message here and say invalid email. Are you good?
Yes, sir. I'm good. Thank you very much.
Now, I still want this email to be required. So I now come here and add required. And also add the error message there that email is required. Do you understand what's happening?
Yes, sir. I get it now.
Are you sure?
Yes, sir. I guess I understand. Definitely. Thank you.
If you don't understand, we can go over it again.
Yes, sir.
Hmm?
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Who else does not understand what's happening? How many people do we have in the class today? Let me see. 12. Who doesn't understand what's going on? Okay, Faith, go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Okay, good morning, sir.
Good
So my
morning.
question is, what if we did yup dot string dot require dot email, the method, will it not still work?
Okay, so yeah, like I said, you understand the concept of syntax, right?
Yes, sir.
So if you want to try out those things out now, you have seen what it looks like here. You are free. That's just removing this one and putting it before email, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you can go ahead and try it on your end and then give us the result.
Okay.
Do you understand? But this is basic syntax. This is how I was taught to write my validation schema.
Okay, sir.
Okay. And ideally, from my experience and a lot of people I have worked as side by side with, and a lot of code bases I have been on, this is how validation schemas are written. But if you interchange them and it works for you, that's fine. Do you understand? Maybe you want your own code base to look different. It's okay. It's allowed. As far as it works. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So now we have our validation schema done, right? We want to go into building our form field, right? So we're using just name and email for this. So basically, yup is used for form validation. Yeah, exactly. So yup is the form validation library, basically. It's used for form validation. Okay, so let's move forward and so let's create our form. So as you can see, we're going to have form. Formik actually. Okay, so for Formik, we are now going to define our initial value. So if you notice, this is an object, right? So whatever we are defining as our initial value has to be an object, and it should accept name and email, right? Which is what we are doing here. And then there should be strings, right? See that this is a string, this is an empty string, right? Now we add our validation schema. So you might want to ask questions based off this validation schema. This is a part of Formik. Okay. So why we define our validation schema is because we want to we want to have something to, we can come here and define our validation schema, but that will not be decent, right? But defining our validation schema like this gives us a clean structure to our code. So all we need to do is bring in our validation schema and add it to this place. So this is what Formik is going to be using to validate our form. If you don't understand, please write in the text box. I'll come back to you and explain for them. So yeah, you understand the whole. Now on submit for Formik, we want to take the values, right? Definitely the values. Then we want to set submitting, and then we want to set a set timer. We want to have a set timer that will alert us, when we submit. Okay. Let's close this here. Let's out. Okay, so we have our Formik done. So the value is part of that's what we just did here. We already initialized. Now using Formik, we don't need to do use state. Do you understand? Because Formik is already handling state management for the whole form. Do you understand, Daniel? Daniel, do you understand? Good. So for these values now, Formik is going to be pulling the values by itself. Formik, as in the library, is going to be pulling the values by itself for us. And then it is going to be updating this initial value. This initial value now is like our use state. It's like the state that we have set, right, in the Formik structure. So now, when we have values, right, Formik takes those values on its own and adds it and updates the state, the initial state, updates the state, and then submits the form. So it updates the states, takes the values, submit the form. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Faith, you're right. So let's go ahead and so it's submitting, and then we want to now define our form under a submitting. So we'll say form, and then let's have our label. Let's give the form a little bit structure. So then we have our label, name, and then we want to use field. So you see, we already can you hear me? So you see, we already imported field here. Okay. So we are going to just utilize that field component, right? And then we also imported our error message. So we are also going to use that error message. Right? All right. So for this now, right, we have our label field, and we might want to let us have this HTML for name. Okay. So we have our label, we have the field, right? where we are, this is our input field, but Formik provides its own input field for you. You can use normal input field with Formik though, and you can also write your own error handler if you don't want to use Formik error handlers, right? So with this now, let me close this so that we stop having this error. Okay. So let's have our email field. This should be email. Okay. And error is going to be email. And the components will be div. Okay. Good. So from here, next step, we want to have a button component of type submit. Then we want to disable this button if we cannot submit. Okay. And then we close it. Let's give it a Python. Okay, hold on, I'm coming. Submit. Yeah. Okay, so you said the label for email is showing, all right, yeah, actually, the content, right? Should be email. All right. So this is our form. Our form is done, basically. So let's see it in action for real time. Using this as our entry point. Let's just do it. Objects. What is this? What is happening? Okay. So we have our form, sign up form, right? So let's assume we start with this. So we have name is required, email is required. Are we following? Are we following? So let's assume I input this. See that the email changes, is showing invalid email. The error message has changed to invalid email. If I put this now, if I submit it, it won't go. Invalid email. If I say at g.com, right, and I submit, we should have this. So you see that we have the object in our, we are displaying the object as a JSON stringified. We are displaying it as a JSON stringified object, right? Okay, so ETEC, like all these are patterns to write form validation using Formik, right? Because these things doesn't look like normal forms. Yeah. So Formik is a library of its own now. So basically, Formik is forms. It's for form handling, right? It's like an advanced way of handling forms, or advanced tool for handling forms. And if you notice from this code that we've written, you will see that it's way more simplified, right? Right. So if you notice, okay, hold on. I think we are visualizing. Oh, okay, it's correct. Okay, so if you look here, you notice that this is quite simplified, right? You agree with me that this is quite simplified. Are you there, ETech? Hello? Write in the text box, please. When you ask a question like this, you stay active so that you can respond. Oh, okay. So in essence, what I was trying to say is that for this now, if you notice, this is quite simplified, right? You are not writing so much. You are not doing on change. You are not doing handle submit function, right? Even though yes, you under this on submit. Let's assume you are submitting to an API. Definitely, you would write your logic for submission to API within this inside here, right? So your logic will be inside here, or maybe you're using Redux. You are going to be dispatching your submit logic inside this on submit. Is the set timer part of the syntax? No. So we don't have API here right now. We're not working with API, right? So I'm just using this to display an alert, right? And set the submission to false. Faith, do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. ETech, are you good?
But then, okay.
Yeah, go on. Faith, go on.
Yeah, but then that's set submitting. What is he working for? Is looking like a function to update state, but I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, of course. So it's a Boolean checker, right? We are checking if this form is submitted or not. Do you get?
Okay.
It's like it states too.
So at what point did it turn true? Is it when it finishes executing the function?
Yeah, exactly. So if you notice here, we're already using it to check here, right? For the form before we even trigger the submit button. And then we are saying that if this submit button, if it is not true, right? If we have not clicked this submit button, this one should not be disabled. So apparently here, you should not be able to click this button again when you have submitted. Do you get?
Okay.
Okay. Is there any other thing that is not clear to anybody before we move forward? I need you guys to understand this very well because I want to handle a little bit more complex form field, right? Can we go on?
Sir. Yeah, so that set submitting is like, it's the syntax, it's part of the syntax, right?
Okay. It's something that comes with Formik actually.
Okay. And this is submitting too.
Yeah, you can use it. It's the same thing as set submit and submitting. It's like the same It's like,
yeah.
do you
That's the
understand?
value. Why this one is the function to update the value.
Exactly. Good.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
when you submit, you are initiating this, you are triggering this function to set this value. Okay. Any reason we can reference to later will be nice. Sorry, I don't understand you, E-Tech.
It's asking for resources for
Okay,
this.
resource. And just check out, okay, check out Formik. Formik, check out their documentation. Check out their documentation. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, so it has dropped. Get started with let me see this link. It dropped. Should be the same thing. Yeah, it's the same thing. So yeah, validation from it. So you see, if you look here now, there's a lot of other things you can validate, right? You can validate the max width of the things that they are going to type into this field, right? So just explore. Okay, so just explore this. You can explore the documentation. Generally, understand how this array stuff works, right? There's a lot to learn from here. So feel free to explore. Don't just chill. So you can that link that Faith dropped in the text box to check it out. Okay. All right. Who else are we all clear? Who else does not understand what's happening? Because I don't want us to move without people having clear understanding. Are we good, everyone? Abubakar just left. Why? Okay, let's move forward now. Let's do something else. We can't really take all our time here. Okay, so let's handle a little bit more complex form, right? And maybe introduce one more prop that comes with the Formik, one more component that comes with Formik, right? So let's import field array. Field array on Formik. Okay. So for this now, let's modify our validation schema, all right? So let's add address. And then for address, we want to have an object. So we say yop dot object dot shape. And then for inside address, we want to have streets. And then we want to, yeah. So for streets, we have it as a string. Yes, it's required. Street is required. Then we want to have city. Yep. So we want to have the same thing, a string required. And then we want to say city is required. All right. We'll not stop there. We want to add, let's say we want to have like we want to add friends. Let's assume maybe we want to gather all your friends. You want to tell us or give us the names of all your friends, right? So we want to take your name, your email, your address, and then the names of your friends, right? And we want this scenario where these friends list should be in an array, right? So we say friends yup dot array dot of yup dot object. And I'll say dot shape again. And then within the shape, we want to now have name. So for this name, we want it to be a string. Required. Is required. Okay, so we have this in place now. So as you can see, right? I we have hands up. Okay. Faith, go ahead. Unmute.
Yeah, what I wanted to say was that I don't know if you showed the error messages. Like, did you? I wanted to see how the error messages come up. Like, if a user does not enter a field now and submit, that place will say
Yeah.
name is required
We
and stuff.
actually visualize that.
Ah, okay.
You can see. So let's remove this. So you can see the error message here. The email is
It will
invalid.
show it immediately.
Yes, the email is invalid. Once I don't need to submit, I don't need to click submit for this error message to show.
Okay.
Right? So once I
And
say you
okay.
dot, the error message disappears. Same thing
And
with
I
this.
guess
I remove this, name is required.
oh, but what if you want it to be at the top of the
Yeah,
like that field,
yeah, this what is displaying the error message.
that error message?
So all you need to do is copy it and put it at the top. As far as the name
Okay.
as far as the name property is defined and it aligns with
And
what you already set to your
yeah, and you can style it as well, right? Is it possible to give it a class?
Of course, yes, of course, you can give it a class and style it. Like you can see, it's the component, and the component, we're calling it a div component, so you can actually style a div component. So if you give it a class name and style it, there's no, I don't think we have any, that will take our time. Let's focus
Yeah,
on,
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, you can do that, definitely.
Thank you.
Can we move?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right, so, okay, let's go back. So I'm sure you guys understand what's happening here. It's just validation. It's not rocket science. If you look at it, you see that I'm defining an array. I want this name to be displayed to be an array. So I want to collect this object that has key of name and the property, like name, the name on this side, right? A string. I want it to be an object. I want that object to be in an array. So if I add 10 names, those 10 names should be in an array. Is it clear? You want me to replace a string with number? Yes, exactly. If it is number, we replace it with number. So let's just add age. Say your dot number. So we can decide not to make it required, right? So if we don't make it required, even if you don't add the age, right, the form will still submit. Are we clear? E-Tech, is that clear? Can still required age is required. Okay, so let's go to our handle submit. So for our handle submit now, we have our validation schema done. Yeah, as you can see, our validation schema is done here. So we want to have our initial values properly initiated, right? So let me break it down for readability. So we want to have our initial values to match our schema, right? So we say address. Okay, we have age now. So we say age, then we say address. So for address, it's an object, right? So we say street. It's a string. And then city. It's also a string. Okay. Then we now have our friends. So like you see what I said? So for each name I'm going to add, it's going to be an object of its own, but I want it to be different objects arranged here. So we have an array of objects. Yeah, exactly. Well, for this, there are some you can definitely use the regex. Why? Because let's assume you want to have a phone number input field, right? And then you want it to be specific to a particular country code, right? You want to use a regex to define it well. Now. Do you understand? Yeah. So age is required. Okay, so age is not supposed to be a string, right? It's supposed to be number. Faith, that's what you mean, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you're correct. So based off our validation, age is a number, age is just a number. Okay, so we have our initial value set up perfectly to match our validation schema, right? Yeah, age is just a number. To match our validation schema. Then we will now want to basically that settles it for we are not going to be, we don't need to modify our on submit function, right? Because it's the same values, we are still submitting values. You see that the values have been modified. If you look here now, you see that the values have been modified. We now have name, age, name, email, age, address, street, city, friends, right? So we can move. So we go into creating our form components, right? So we have our name and our email done. We want to have our address. That's where things start becoming a little complicated. In a good way, though, in a good way. So let's have address. Okay. This is not what I want. So let's to be H1. Address. Okay. Let's register. All right. So we have our H3 tag. So we have our label, right? So for this now, we are going inside this address section, we are going to have two input fields, right? One input field for streets and the other for city. So modify everything. So for here now, we'll say, for this name, we're going to say address dot street. And for name here, we're going to say address dot city. Does it make sense to you all? Are you guys following? Who doesn't understand what is happening? No, okay, okay. I'm saying thumbs up. Who has this thumbs up? Okay. Hey, do you understand? I'm following. Okay, good. All right. Yeah, so we'll change that. Yeah. Thank you. We're going to change it. Field type will not remain that one. So for this, we have address as street. For this, we have text. And for this, we have streets. Okay. All right. So as you can see now, we have our address. Why do we have address or street here? You understand perfectly well that we have address and we are trying to access the street of the address. So for the value, if we want to pick the value, we want to pick the value from address and then want to target streets, right? And pick the value. So that's just the simple stuff that's going on in this section, right? So we have our error message done. We are using the dot notation to access the next step. Exactly, yeah, to access the next step object. Okay, okay, nice. I'm happy you guys understand that. Okay, so we move to the next part. So for this part now, you understand that when we're adding these friends here, right? When we're adding these friends here now, we want a scenario where we can have more than one friend name, right? Are we together? Good. So for this purpose now, we will definitely want a scenario where we can add new names. So let's say we add the first name, add another name, and add another name, right? So we want to create a comp field. Let's go with the div first. Yeah. Then let's have our H3. I'll call it friends. Okay. Then let's go ahead and say field array. So we already imported field array here, right? When we just started this very form. So we go for field array and we now call the array friends. The array name is friends. Okay. And close this. Now within the field array, you want to insert, remove, or push. Right? So we say div. . Then within the div, we now have values. Values.friends, the length. We want to check if the length of friends, if it is greater than 0, right? We want to take the values and map it, right? And have friends and an index, right? And then map it into a component. So we say div, we want to have a key there. Then we want to have our field. So for field, we want to have name. So be friends. Dot index. Components. That's fine. We don't need that. So we can have a placeholder. Yeah, so we can have a placeholder of friends. Okay. Now we should close this. All right. So we want to have our error message. All right. And for error message, same thing. There is the name. I'm going to have error message. New placeholder. And we have components. This. Okay. All right, so we have this. Now we want to be able to add to these components, right? We want to be able to add new names to our input field. So we're going to add the button component. And for this component, so we are going to add the component. So this button, rather, this button is going to be for removing whatever we want, whatever we don't want. Let's assume that I wrote the wrong name and I want to change the name, right? That's where this button comes in. Now, we now close this up, and then we will have another button. We have another button to, hold on, let's cover this. Okay, so we now have another button to add. So this one now is to remove, right? And we want to have another button to add. So we're using push. So we're using remove and push, right? Is something we've done before. So it shouldn't confuse you. It's just normal stuff. We are just adding to our to the object, right? We are pushing a new object to our array. So it's not something that should confuse anybody. So we now conclude with covering that up, right? Okay. Oh, all right, okay. So do you all understand what happened here, what I've done here before we move forward? Any questions? Is it clear? Okay, it says still I see the visual. Okay. So let's have our summit. Okay. Excuse me. So we have our summit already. Yeah. So let's see. Let's follow and see what our visuals look like. Visual values is not defined a child using Formik 66. Okay. 66. 66. 66. Okay. Values is not defined. So give me a second. Let me know why values now. Why is showing values is not defined. All right, no problem. Okay, yeah. So this is where we have an issue. So we did not define values here. Okay, are we good? Do we understand what happened there? Thank you. Do we understand what happened there? So we didn't define the values, like, because we didn't define it here, we cannot access it inside this form. Yeah. Well, it has been defined now, so we can access it. Yeah, thank you. I've corrected that. So okay, save. So if we save this, we should have our form input field display. Okay, so as you can see, we have our form input field. Our form generally displayed out. We have our basic name, email, right? Okay, there's something missing here, and we would have had an error if I did not notice it. But none of you noticed it. We don't have age here. Okay, good. So we are here. Let's see what it looks like. So if I just let me refresh so that it will not be like we are performing magic. So if I just click on this input field, if I don't make any input and click outside, I should get name is required, right? Same thing for this, same thing for this. So for this now, there's a default value. So there's a chance that our validation might not work on this age field, right? Are we together? Good. So there's a chance that we might not have good. So, but for street, if we click on street and we come out, it will give us street is required. We click on city and come out, city is required. Likewise, everything, friend's name is required, right? Now, if we come here and let's say I input everything and age, right? And then friend's name is not imputed. You see that we still have friend's name. See that as I cancel that, I have canceled the whole input field, but I can still submit this form. So let's check that validation again. I don't think, okay. All right. So you see that address generally is not required from what we can see here. Sorry, friends. So friends generally, the array is not required. The object is not required, but the name itself is what's required, right? So particularly for this now, we can still submit our form with an empty array of friends. Do you understand? But if we want to add friends now, we can come here and add gray. If we submit, we should have gray as part of our submitted data. Are you following? Do we understand? Do we understand? Do we still have people in the class? Yes, but what if we want the user to enter at least a friend's name? All right, so let's make it required. Oh, not materials. Let's delete that. Let's make that required too. All right, so let's do this again. So let's remove this. And then remove this. And try to submit. Not going. So let's remove friends and try to submit. Not going to. So let's see. Friend's name is required. Okay. So are we together? So you can see that friend's name is required now. Let's add everything. It's still submitting. Okay, I see. Okay, so when our input field is not visible, right? If you notice what's happening. Hello, Faith, you asked that question. So stay active. Faith, can you hear me? So when our input field is not visible, right? We can submit this form without adding a friend. But when our input field is visible, right? So it is only when this input field is available that validation is working, right? So if we try to submit now, we cannot submit without adding this friend's name. Is that clear? Faith, is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that clear to every other person? Henry, I see you writing sharp. Is it clear to you, Abi? Which one? I don't understand sharp. Henry Okuli. Is it clear? Yes, okay, all right. Yes, it is. Okay, all right, okay. So we can remove and add friend if we wish to. So let's add a new friend. We can remove this friend, right? But when this input field is available, we can submit. Let's assume we remove it. We can submit now. So that's valid. All right. So basically that's like what it looks like to use Formik to handle your form validation, right? The complexity of your form, and you see how this friends aspect became a little bit complex, but we can still use Formik without stress to handle it, right? So yeah, so basically that's what basics of utilizing Formik and your for form validation. So any questions? Anybody has any question to ask? It might be you guys always have questions, brilliant questions to ask. So let me give you guys a floor. Let's have some minutes for questions. Waiting. Raise your hand if you have questions. Is Faith still on the call?
Yes, sir.
No questions from your end. You understand? You saw it visually now. Is that fine? Are you good?
Yes. I'll just have to practice.
Yes. Practice is key. And you check the documentation. Try to learn how to utilize the documentation to help yourself understand how to utilize some of these libraries. Right. So explore the documentation. There are a lot of other methods for handling form input values, right? Check out how you can utilize your normal form input fields and still utilize Formik. I think that will be the next take home. That will be your next take home. So your next take home is replicate the same form, right? Replicate this form, but don't use Formik input fields. Don't use the value field component and error message component. Write your own field. Use your input field as you will use it normally, and then use your own error message. Create your own error message, and then we will review it peer to peer before Monday, before our next class on Monday. Is that clear? Yeah, you do your research now. Do your research, work amongst each other, work with yourself, learn. Whereas I'm going to review it. After I review it, we're going to also review it on the call on Monday before we go into our next topic. But I want people to be able to explore. Faith, don't be scared. It's not that difficult. Yeah, Faith will write it on Discord for everybody to see.
So please go back to the listing Chrome so I can take a screenshot.
Okay. Well, your work should not be this scattered. It has to be scattered.
Okay. I guess I'll just list out the input field then.
Yes, your work has to be scattered. All right, so with that, I believe we have come to the close of this session. Thank you all for coming on board today. Thank you for making the class a little bit interesting. Yeah, I appreciate all of you. See you all on Monday for our next class. Bye.